When you're making a short film, you're generally going to have quite a few scenes. There's two ways you can approach them. You can have your scenes as a series of shots, where the camera will change during the scene, so you'll have one camera here, another one there, third one, maybe back to camera 1, and then back to camera 3. And you could then switch between the cameras and render them out from the same scene. The other option would be to have all the scenes rendered separately so that each camera move has its own scene. Both of these are equally valid, and both of which are approaches which you could take to organizing a project. So you could have the same cameras over here doing exactly the same thing. Personally, I prefer the second option. A lot of studios will use the second option as well, because it's more flexible if you need to change a shot. In this case, I would be turning each camera move, which would generally be referred to as a shot in live action, into a scene. The biggest problem with this, though, is that it can be a very laborious process to set up all the scenes. While the scripting at OpenToonz is very limited, I can at least create all the scenes in a far more straightforward way. Generally, what you would do first is you would get a storyboard. Now, this storyboard is very rough and not yet finished. If you were in production, you would want a far more finished storyboard than this. In this case, since it's my own project and I know what I want it to look like, it's not quite as important. But the advantage of doing a storyboard is you know exactly what needs to be done. You can also do an animatic off the storyboard, which will allow you to time how long all of your shots will be. The biggest advantage with the storyboard, though, is you will know exactly how many scenes you need to create. In this case, with this storyboard, I need to create 35 scenes. With our script, we'll want our function to create the scenes. We'll want that. We will want to know the name of the scene. We want to know how many scenes we're going to make. So our function will need to have a name and a number. We also will need to decide on our format. The format which I'm going to use is going to be four digits with 3 leading zeros to start off with. Very few projects will get to have over 9,000 scenes. It would be an incredibly epic film to have over 9,000 scenes, and generally if you were doing a series you would have each set of scenes limited to each episode. So each episode would be a separate project. So that's basically what we've got to do. So now we're going to make a script to do it so that creating scenes will take a lot less time to perform. So now we're going to start by creating a function, and we're just going to log the inputs to our function so that we can test if it works. We're going to call the function createScene to make it obvious. Then we're just going to print the values. So go to the File menu. We'll run the script, which is on my desktop. We'll run it. We'll say undefined, and now we can run the function with a scene name and a number added. I have used 4 as a number so that I am creating a few scenes so that I can see that it will loop through the scenes correctly when I need to make them. So the next thing we will do is we will create a for loop so we can cycle through the names so we can see if we are generating the correct names for the scenes. So we'll make a for loop which loops through the number which we want for the scenes. We'll then make a variable for the scene name, and we will then log that variable. For that scene name variable, we're going to put in the name, and we're going to add the incremented value to that variable. And after the scene name, we will just log that name. We're going to save that, and we're going to see what happens when we run it in OpenToonz. What you'll see when we run the script is that we get our scene names, but they are nowhere near what we want them to be. The first problem is there are no leading zeros. A more important problem, though, is I want my scenes to start at the number 1, and this is starting at 0. So we'll just fix these quickly. The first thing we'll do is we will fix the numbering by starting with number 1 and adding 1 to our total number, so it will then go from 1 to 5 rather than from 0 to 4. For the leading zeros, I'm going to create another function which is going to determine how much padding is going to be before the numbers. I'm going to call the function pad because this is going to be padding. Then I'm going to want to have the size of the padding. While I could hard code the size of the padding, it is better to keep it as a variable. If more functionality is added to the Toonz scripting, it will be easier and more flexible when updating the script. The second variable will be the number which I want to have on the padding, which will be passed into this script from the for loop, which will be the value I. There are many ways to do this. This is probably not the best way, but it is functional and it is straightforward for what we are going to be using. So what we're going to do first is we're going to create a variable, and that variable is going to be a string. What that variable is going to be is a number of zeros to which we are going to then add our number. So what this will do is it will basically add the number which is put into this function to the end of that string of zeros. Then what we're going to do is we're going to return a substring which is only going to be the last 4 digits of this whole number. To do that, we're going to use the substring method. The substring method will allow you to put a start and a value for any substring in a string. You can choose any start and end value, but if you only put in a start value, it is going to take the string from that start value to the end of the string. And what we're going to want is we're going to want the last digits of the string, and those digits are going to be this size over here. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to find the length of this string up until that size. So what we will do is we'll then take the string and we'll get the length. And we will subtract the size. And that should now give us our padding number. So in order to get the padding number, we're now going to have to run this function. So we're going to run this function over here. So we're going to create a variable for that number and we're going to run it in the for loop. We're going to put in size 4 and we're going to put in I for the second variable. And then we are going to put in the name and the pad number. And then we're going to save that and run that in OpenToonz. As you'll see, we're now far closer to the naming that we want. I just want to have the underscore. Another important thing is I need to save these files as Toonz files, because whenever you create a scene, you're going to want to use the file as a .tnz file. So we will just fix that, and then we will finish the script. First I add the underscore to the name, then I add the TNZ extension to the end of the name of the file. And now what we need to do is we need to create a scene, and we need to make sure that that scene is saved when we run the script. To create a scene, we are going to use the scene class. Now we've created the scene object, we're going to have to create the actual scenes. In order to do this, we are going to use the save method. And what we're going to save the scenes under is the name that we have created, which would be the scene name. And then I'm just going to comment out all of the logs which I have created. And we will see if this script will run. Back in OpenToonz, we'll just run the script. And if we go to our browser, we will see that we have a problem. We'll see that we've actually created the scenes, but that they do not show up because it reads them as a sequence of scenes with 4 frames. The problem is that OpenToonz will read file formats either with an underscore or a point, followed by 4 numerals and an extension as a sequence. And it will not matter what file type that is, it will read either of those as a sequence of images. So we cannot use either of those naming conventions if there are 4 numerals. Any other amount of numerals, it should be fine, but if you have an underscore or a point and then 4 numerals, it will read that as a sequence. So we're going to have to change that script, and we are either going to have to remove the underscore, or we cannot have 4 zeros. In this case, I'm going to change the underscore, and I'm just going to change it to a standard hyphen. I'm going to save that, and then we're going to run it again in OpenToonz. Now if we go back to the browser, we will see that we now have our scenes created. And I can use this script to create as many scenes as I want to. So if I go to my short film project and make that the active project, now that that's the active project, I can choose to run my script. So I'll now run my script again. So now I'm back in my browser. If I now look at my scenes folder, I can see that I have all 36 scenes that I need for my project and that I do not have to create them manually.